welcome to the program. I am Sharon Ijason. This episode is full of interesting stories. Recently, some workers of the Ikeja Electricity Company were sacked. Their sack might have brought a bit of relief to the company, but it has caused a wave of angry reaction. These and more are our focus this week. As usual, let's go for the labor news. We'll be right back. The World Work Decent Day was celebrated across the world. The 2017 theme to mark the day was titled End Corporate Greed. The Nigerian Labour Congress visited several companies in Lagos to picket companies accused of putting workers through precarious work conditions, especially casualization of staff.
For more than 5 years, 10 years, 12, 15 years, workers have been astronaut. The dignity in labor, in casualization is eroded. No casual worker is entitled to pension, not because of gratuity. There is no leave for them, no maternity leave, there is no right for them at all. These are workers that are accepted from the welfare package of such organizations. Of which consolidated factory where we are today is one of the leading companies in Lagos State in the act of actualization and anti-unionization.
At Consolidated Business Holdings, the human resource manager and other management team members met with the Nigerian Labour Congress. They spoke about the welfare of their staff.
What we have here is an apprentice, and we give them 15,000 naira per month. They will sign to learn printing. They will come and sign an agreement to learn printing for a period of years, at times 3 years, 4 years. And every individual in this company understands our problems. You understand? So, and we've explained to them from their meeting today.
Workers believe that the Work Decent Day is another opportunity to remind employers of labor of the need to improve workers' welfare. More than 100 workers of different unions took to the streets to mark the World Day for Decent Work. General Secretary of the National Union of Textile Garment and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria, Comrade Issa Aremu, who is also the President, Industrial Hall Global Union, and African Region President, said Nigerian workers deserve decent work conditions, while obnoxious policies hindering freedom of workers must be abolished.
We are opposed to casualization, outsourcing of labor. We are opposed to precarious work, and we are using today to reaffirm the dignity of labor as contained in our constitution as well as Nigerian labor laws. Workers have the right to live in a minimum wage. Workers have the right to pensions after they have diligently served the enterprises they work with. And workers have the right to life.
Workers have the right to organize themselves, to come together, to defend the rights of their employment. And unfortunately, what we are having in the country today is outsourcing, contract labor. In fact, we are going back to the era of slave labor. And that is why it is very, very necessary that we come together to fight this cause.
Campaigning against the precarious work day. And what it means is the opposite of a decent work. Decent work requires a good living wage. And that is why we are saying that as of today, agreement of 2010 on 18,000 minimum wage can no longer sustain any worker. So it's long overdue. And we are calling on the federal government. They have a responsibility.
The International Confederation of Trade Unions has urged international financial institutions to help boost workers' income around the world by supporting a strengthening of weakened collective bargaining rights and an expansion of universal social protection. The ITUC General Secretary Sharon Buron said the increased wages will do so much to reverse the fall in workers' income share in most countries, stop the increasing inequality, and increase global demand to sustain economic recovery. Senior officials of the Nigerian Union of Local Government Employees have visited the Katsina State House of Assembly in a rally to agitate for local council autonomy in the country. The rally, which was attended by local and national members of the organization, was led by its president. He insists that granting autonomy for local government would end agitation for restructuring in the country.
Any society where the exclusive approach to governance is the order of the day, we will witness a lot of crisis, chaos, confusion, and criminal activities in the society. And that is exactly what we are passing today. In a situation whereby in Nigeria today you cannot move freely from Abuja to Kaduna, look at the proximity and how busy that road is, and how many number of local governments are there between Abuja to Kaduna. Because of the important nature of local government rendered by this state government and political elites in our country, this problem of insecurity is everywhere.
Christian Omone is a former staff of the Ikeja Electricity Company. He and the other workers were disengaged from work due to non-performance. Christian says he had been working in the power sector since 1988, first with the National Electric Power Authority (NEPA), which later became Power Holding Company of Nigeria. It was in the wake of privatization that he got a job offer with Ikeja Distribution Company as a marketer. Having lodged 28 years of experience in the electricity sector, Christian tries to make a comparison between working in the public and private sector.
In PACN, it was still government, and probably the issues of corporate governance were like paramount to those who felt it was not being run properly. But I can say that Nigerians were far better off in PACN than the privatization era, because the privatization was itself a fraud. Fraud in the sense that the supposedly capital that was supposed to have been brought to turn the place around was not there. And we are now beginning to hear that it was rather just a new Africanist political partitioning of our national patrimony by some people who call themselves politicians but are just prodigal sons of this country. And that is why it's not working. So the so-called investors are not investors, but politicians who wanted to take over our national property. And that is why it's not working. If PACN has remained, and maybe management has entered, our government has entered into a management contract, maybe we would have been better off.
He alleges that poor performance was not the reason Ikeja Electricity sacked him and the other workers, as it was a yearly ritual at the company to lay off workers.
The issue of poor performance is relative to what parameters they want to use as a measurement for poor performance. Secondly, just like my house now, a marketer who manages my place cannot come now and tell me I must pay bill when I know every evening I will buy fuel of 1,000 naira and you're going to give me a bill of nearly 15 to 20,000 naira, and you want me to pay it. I'll raise issues. Do you understand? So what it means is that the so-called poor performance is not a direct reflection of the effort of the involved staff. It's a lot of things combined, including operational, institutional, and of course, the service availability. So somehow, it's also a company policy thing. The people in Ikeja Electric, I think they have issues, they have phobia for people who were former PACN staff, and they did not hide it. So it's like a policy of the company that they want to do away with everybody that has had something to do with PACN. And that's also part of the reason why they are not doing well. Because places where they have embraced the old PACN staff with their expertise and experience, they are doing far better than them. That is the truth.
I recently had a chat with the public relations officer of Ikeja Electricity Company, who took the opportunity to address the allegations.
I mean, there are reasons why employees and employers can disengage from. Both parties have the right to disengage at any point in time, and it's actually a contractual agreement that has been signed from the beginning. So, as an employer, if you think that certain individuals do not align with your goals and objectives, you can decide to ask them to leave. And also, if you are an employee and you think that the company does not suit what your aspirations or goals, you can also decide to leave. So these are contractual agreements that have been signed, and I think that both parties have the right to exercise these contractual agreements at any point in time. So that is what has happened in this case. 10 employees were disengaged from the business for certain reasons, and I mean, disengagement from the business is not the first step. I mean, there must have been a series of engagement with employees. Look, the philosophy behind some of these actions or exercises, because you are trying to create a more efficient business place, and then you're also trying to offer your customers a lot of a better customer experience.
After 28 years in service, Christian Omone believes privatization of the power sector has been a total rip-off as erratic power supply continues to create rolling blankets of blackouts across the country.
Well, yes and no. Everybody wants much better electricity than they get. That's the truth of the matter. But compared to what existed some 2 years ago, it's relative improvement. Unpredictable, but it's a little better than it was before. And that's my honest opinion.
Well, we do, but it's just as if we don't. At least it's there, but it's not regular. When I say regular, I mean, at times it will just be maybe 1 or 2 hours a day, and it won't come again till around maybe 9 at night. They will take it, and then it's not regular. It's not what anybody can just appreciate. For now, we don't consider ourselves having electricity at all.
Electricity, as far as I'm concerned, now we'll give God the glory, because unlike before, it was epileptic. But one thing with light is, I suppose light's supposed to be in the midnight, because that's the essence of light, so that people will not be in darkness. But in my area, what I noticed is that we don't normally have light at night. Though morning till night now, there will be light from morning till around 7 o'clock in the evening. But 7 o'clock in the evening till midnight, there is no light. So I want them to improve on the electricity supply.
I cannot say much about the light because I not enjoy light very well. Because I'm from my house now, I used to be paid for our house. One day on, 3 days off. That's why. So why do you give us be paid without nothing? No light, no enjoyment for light. That is it.
Yes, we are enjoying it here.
We are enjoying it. So
yes, at least there are 20 hours
in a day.
In a day.
The International Labour Organization has a convention on termination of employment, which requires fairness from the employer of labour and also the democratization of termination of employment. Did the Ikeja Distribution Company follow these procedures before firing some of its staff? I will be speaking with the General Secretary of the National Union of Electricity Employees, Comrade Joe Ajero, who happens to also be the National President of the United Labour Congress. Join me. You're welcome to Labour Lens.
Thank you very much.
All right, sir. I would like to ask you, so much has been asked about the Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company's sack of workers. Would you say that the company followed due process?
Well, last year, the Ikeja Electricity Distribution Company sacked workers, over 200. And we had series of picketing there. and they went to court. The courts are yet to deliver judgment on the matter. So why a matter is still in court? This year again, they have sacked, and we did them one small letter. We are still proposing to visit them. They now wrote us a letter that we should remember that the matter is in court, and that they have copied the courts with a letter that they wrote to us and the one we wrote to them. And you now start to ask yourself, if a matter was in court and they went and took an action, it's like prejudicing the outcome of the court. And then you now wanted to react, and they're telling you that the matter is in court and they have copied the court. So what that means is that Ikeja thinks they are above the law. They are not thinking of following due process. In industrial relations, if you want to go embark on any redundancy, you have to write and invite the union and meet with them and discuss the reason, because it's going to affect their members.
How would you rate poor performance? That's the reason the electricity company gave for the sack of workers in this energy sector. What is tenable when it comes to performance of workers?
When people talk about poor performance, they talk of it in relative terms. If you look at performance, there should be indices. Even in an examination, there should be measurement and evaluation. And for you to measure, there is a kind of scheme, that if you do this, you score this. If you do this, you score this. It's not something that is exclusive to management. You don't evaluate worker, based on your own terms. Now, if the variables are not such that the worker can control or may control, you can't say you have given somebody a fair hearing. You must look at the validity of any test or any evaluation. Is it valid? The result, is it the target, is it achievable? Now, for a street or for a zone where you don't have electricity for 1 month, and you have a marketer in that area, and you now rate him low, do you expect people there to pay their bills when there is no electricity supply? Now you are now basing his assessment on the ability of people to go and pay their electricity bill, and the ability of those people, the motivation for them to go and pay, since they didn't receive supply within that period, is not there. For that, you rate the worker low, and you sack him, and you say productivity. So if you don't bring all the variables, in context, you just use any word, they are performing below expectation.
Last year, workers were sacked at the Ikeja Distribution Electricity Company. This year, also we're experiencing that. Last year, when they actually sacked workers, I remember very vividly that Nuyi picketed the Ikeja Disco Company and also crippled activities of the electricity company for days. What should we be expecting following this development?
Well, I think what happened was that I did a letter to them and told them that was the first and last letter, and I have not done a second letter. They have sent 1 or 2 representations here since after that time, but they are not willing to reverse what they have done. Besides, they rushed to the DSS, and we had meetings with the DSS. Those ones promised they were going to facilitate a meeting. So we are running out of patience, and we have given those ones all the time to facilitate the meeting and to do what they can do. When and how we are going to react is best known to us, but we definitely will shall.
What has been your experience following the privatization of the electricity sector? Would you say it was necessary for us to have privatized our electricity sector? Has anything changed? And I would like you to share your experience as a union leader following the fact that workers who were actually laid off then actually had a very good severance package.
Well, I wouldn't know those that came with the concept of privatization, especially in the third world countries. Those people did a lot of disservice to humanity. And for those Africans, especially those Nigerians that bought into the concept of privatization,
the sins of thousands of people, both workers and consumers, will be on their heads. Their blood will be on their heads. Privatization in Europe and some other advanced economies of the world was a kind of post-industrialization concept. It wasn't pre. Europe, pre-industrialization, wouldn't have said they are going to the market. We are going to hand over to the private sector. Go and check all the roads constructed in Europe. Go and check all the power stations constructed in Europe up to this moment. As I talk with you now, 250,000 megawatts of electricity generated in the United States of America, the headquarters of capitalism in the world, is by the government, the state, the federal, and the municipal councils. There. Now, then they now allow the private sector, and others to generate their own electricity to complement on their target, because America is targeting 1 million megawatts power. Now, but in Nigeria, they will tell you that government has no business in business. So, what is the duty of government if not for the welfare of the people, of the citizenry? If government has no business in business, so why will government exist if they have no business in business? So, and that concept destroyed everything in Nigeria. All the places, instead of the private sector to come and participate, they now took over. So what we are now having is transferring of public monopoly to private monopoly. And at the very moment that happened, Nigeria started going down, whether in electricity or other sectors. And some of us warned then that any commodity that is not available cannot be affordable. There was no argument that we didn't put across. But when we now later realized that the buyers, the sellers are the buyers by proxy, So what they did, if you watch between 2013 to date, the Nigerian government has given almost $1 trillion, to the same people that bought it. And we were made to understand that maybe those people spent about 400 billion to buy it. But government has paid over 800 or more billion to them. The issue of electricity privatization in Nigeria is a curse. It's not a blessing in disguise. And some people who try to ventilate their frustration were calling for the reversal. And the response we got from the Minister of Power was that for it to be reversed, the entitlement of workers will be returned. And you start to think, do you call these men senior advocates of Nigeria? Somebody who doesn't know that the severance for a work done is for period of work done. So if I have worked in a place for 10 years and you severe me for 10 years, you say I should return for that 10 years. Severance, is it dash? Is it money dash to people? And that was the height of my disappointment on the Minister of Power. So the policy of privatization, I think Nigerians are in a better position to now say, but it's like they are being shut up by the so-called ministers that they should not talk. Whether power situation is improving or not, whether they're increasing their tariff. Because even when the issue of tariffs was increased, no consultation, nothing. The increased tariff, Nigerians must pay. I think what some of us did was to keep quiet for Nigerians to talk. And I think they are talking.
And that's all we can take on today's episode of Labor Lens. Join us same time next week for a fresh edition of Labor Lens. I am Sharon Ijason, and remember, labor creates wealth.